Willow's hands trembled slightly as she stirred the pot of beef stew, Mark's favorite, the steam rising to fog her vision as much as her unshed tears did. The bruise on her wrist throbbed in time with her pulse. At the table, Mark shoveled a spoonful into his mouth, grunting with minimal approval. "How was work?" she ventured, her voice small in the cramped kitchen. He launched into a 20-minute tirade about incompetent coworkers and ungrateful customers, bits of his food spraying from his mouth. When he finally paused for a breath, she opened her mouth to mention her day, but his eyes narrowed dangerously. What could possibly be so hard about wiping some rich guy's ass? He sneered, and she swallowed her words with her lukewarm stew. Later that night, Willow sat at the vanity Mark had rescued from someone's trash. Its mirror webbed with a crack that split her reflection in two. She worked the brush through her hair with mechanical strokes, pausing only when she heard the clink of another bottle being opened in the living room. She remembered the weight of Eden's gaze that afternoon, how it had made her feel both seen and hunted. Willow remembered the night she'd spent huddled in closets, counting her father's footsteps as they scurried across floorboards, praying he'd pass out before finding her. Her mother's vacant eyes as the needle slipped from blue-veined fingers. The Christmas she was 9, Willow had wrapped her own present, a half-empty bottle of her mother's perfume, and placed it under their barren tree, pretending it came from her mother, who'd been dead 3 months by then. She still remembered the smell of cheap pine and vomit, how her father had slurred, "Who's this from?" before hauling it against the wall. By 16, she'd lived in 7 different homes, sleeping on pull-out couches where uncle's friends accidentally wandered in at night. She signed her emancipation papers that year. She had nothing but a garbage bag of clothes and a high school ID. When Mark found her working at the gas station register, his smile was the first one that didn't want something from her first. "You look tired," he'd said, leaving his number and a $5 tip for a $3 coffee. He was the one who encouraged her to get her nursing degree. "You're smart, Willow," he'd said, his fingers gentle on her cheek. "You could save lives." She'd cried that night, overwhelmed that someone finally saw potential in her. She worked double shifts at the gas station between classes, falling asleep over textbooks with highlighter smudged on her cheek. When she passed her certification, Mark had brought her a cake with her name spelled wrong. She'd eaten it anyways, grateful. They'd bonded over shared wounds, fathers who used fists instead of words, mothers who looked away. "I'll never be like that," Mark had promised, holding her so tenderly she believed him. The first time he called her stupid, she told herself it was stress. The first shove came after she got a raise, and he realized she was now making more money than him and paying off her student loans. His apology flowers withered on the table as she iced her shoulder. When he asked her to move in, she packed her few possessions with fearful hands, telling herself everyone deserves a second chance. The night she burned dinner, he dragged her across the kitchen by her hair. As she curled in the linoleum, she realized she traded one prison for another, except this one she had walked into willingly. As she stared at herself in the mirror, her fingers trembled against her scalp. At the hospital, between her shifts at the estate, she could almost forget. Her hands, the same ones that trembled at home, were sturdy when they found a vein on the first try. Patients thanked her with genuine smiles she collected like small treasures, sometimes changing bandages or adjusting an IV in the hushed midnight hours. Willow would catch her reflection in a darkened window and barely recognize the confident woman staring back. The uniform was like armor. The hospital, the only place where her gentleness wasn't a weakness to be exploited, but a strength that mattered. With a sharp inhale, she switched off the lamp and slid between the sheets, curling away from the empty space that would soon be filled with the sour smell of beer and rage. Morning light crept through the blinds as Willow cracked eggs into the pan one-handed. Mark slouched into the kitchen, his unshaven jaw cracking with a yawn that reeked of stale beer. "Good morning," he mumbled, dragging the wooden chair across the linoleum that was peeling at the corners. "Morning," Willow responded, her voice barely audible as she slid the spatula under a perfectly cooked egg. Outside the smudged kitchen window, a pair of cardinals flitted between the branches of the half-dead oak tree. Their crimson feathers flashed like tiny beacons against the dishwater sky, their melodic chirping filtering through the thin glass. A smile tugged at the corner of her chapped lips. Those birds answered to no one. They soared above the grime and desperation, carried on wings that knew no chains. Someday, she thought, her fingertips tracing the condensation on the window pane. "What are you smiling about, Lo?" Mark's voice sliced through her daydream. He had paused mid-bite, a triangle of butter-soaked toast suspended between his mouth, his bloodshot eyes narrowing to slits. The scrape of his chair against the floor was the only warning before the plate sailed past her ear, shattering against the wall in a constellation of ceramic shards and sunny-side-up yolk that oozed downward like vicious tears. His breath hit her face, stale coffee and rage mingled with morning sourness, before his callous fingers found her throat, pressing into the soft hollow beneath her jaw. The edges of the kitchen, the peeling wallpaper, the dripping faucet, the flickering fluorescent light began to blur and fade into watercolor smudges. "You're thinking of some guy, aren't you?" She couldn't speak. The pressure on her windpipe was absolute. Black spots danced before her eyes like fireflies as her lungs screamed for oxygen. Willow's hands clawed instinctively at Mark's thick, grease-stained fingers, her chipped pink nail polish a stark contrast against his weathered skin. Her vision tunneled into a blur of gray and black, the world shrinking to just his face, contorted, flushed, a roadmap of broken capillaries across his cheeks. He looked at her not with love, but with a terrifying, mindless ownership, as if she were a tool that had malfunctioned and deserved to be discarded. "You think you're better than me." His spittle landed warm on her cheek. "Look at you. Remember where you are, who you are." He shoved her back. Willow's head hit the refrigerator, a sickening thud echoing through the small kitchen. She slumped to the floor, gasping for air, her small hands quivering as they flew to her neck. Mark grabbed his jacket and slammed the door so hard that the framed pictures on the wall rattled. She sat there for a long time, watching the yellow yolk of the ruined eggs slide down the wall like a slow, weeping wound. By the time Willow arrived at the Renaissance Manor, she had used heavy concealer to mask the fingerprint-shaped bruises on her throat, wrapping a silk scarf tightly around her neck despite the humidity. She tried to maintain her professional mask, but her hands shook as she checked the old man's morphine drip. The hairs on Willow's neck prickled before she realized Eden was in the room. She hadn't heard the door, hadn't sensed movement, just his presence, suddenly there like a change in air pressure. 20 minutes late, Willow," he said, his voice soft as velvet over steel. The vial of morphine slipped in her fingers. She caught it against her palm, heart hammering in her throat where the bruises hid. He stood framed by the window, morning light catching his platinum watch and the predatory stillness in his posture. "And you look pale. Is the mechanic not looking after you?" "I'm fine, Mr. Eden. Just a rough start to the morning. The car wouldn't start right away," she lied. Eden moved towards her with a slow, deliberate grace. He didn't stop until he was deep within her personal space. He reached out, not for her hand, but for the edge of her silk scarf. "It's a beautiful scarf," he murmured, his thumb grazing the fabric just below her ear. "But it's a bit warm for it today, don't you think?" I like the color," she stammered, stepping back. Eden's eyes darkened. He didn't let go of the scarf. "It's a beautiful color. May I see?" In one swift motion, he hooked his finger under the silk and pulled it down. The stark, purple-red marks on her pale skin were revealed, screaming against the elegance of the room. Her hands flew up to her neck, as if that could erase what had been seen. Eden's aura changed. The air in the room felt like it dropped 20 degrees. He didn't look shocked. He looked furious. But it was a cold, calculated fury. He reached out, his cool fingers tracing the exact line of Mark's grip. "He touched you like this?" Eden's voice was a low, vibrating growl. "He put his filthy, calloused hands on a work of art and tried to break it." Willow began to cry, the dam finally breaking. It was just an argument. Shh, Eden whispered, pulling her into a rigid, protective embrace. He pressed his face into her hair, inhaling deeply. "He's a beast, Willow. And beasts don't belong in houses with angels. They belong in the dirt." Over her shoulder, Eden's eyes were fixed on a point in the distance, his mind already spinning a web. He wasn't just comforting her. He was claiming her. "You won't have to go back there tonight," he murmured into her ear. "I've already decided. You're staying here. For your safety." Willow's breath hitched as his fingers lingered on her bruised skin. The intimacy of his touch combined with the raw coldness in his voice sent a different kind of shiver through her, one that felt like a warning she couldn't decipher. "No," she gasped, stepping back out of his embrace, her hands frantically pulling the silk scarf back into place. Her heart beat wildly against her chest. "No, Mr. Eden, please, you shouldn't. I shouldn't have let you see that." She fumbled with the knot of her scarf, her face flushing a deep, humiliated crimson. To her, this was a failure of character. She had been taught that a woman's domestic troubles were hers to bear in silence, and exposing them to her employer, to a man like Mr. Eden, felt like a betrayal of her own dignity. "I have to go home," she said, her voice wavering but insistent. Mark, he just has a temper. He's under a lot of stress with the shop and bills. I probably provoked him. I wasn't fast enough for breakfast and..." "Provoked him?" Eden's voice was dangerously quiet. He watched her struggle with the fabric, his hands now clutched at his side. "You are justifying the hands of a butcher on your throat, Willow." "It's my life, sir," she said, reverting to the formal title as a shield. She couldn't look him in the eye. "It's a private matter between a man and his girlfriend. It's wrong of me to be standing here letting you speak of him this way. I'm a professional, and I'm here to take care of your father." She gripped her clipboard as if it was a life raft. "I'll be in the guest wing preparing Mr. Thorne's midday treatments. Please, let's just forget this happened." She hurried past him, her head bowed. She didn't see the way Eden's expression smoothed out into a mask of terrifying calm. He didn't follow her. He simply turned back to the window, watching her reflection in the glass as she disappeared down the hall. "A private matter." "Did you hear that, Father?" Eden whispered, tracing one finger along the silken edge of the old man's blanket. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, black device, a key fob he duplicated from the set she'd left on the kitchen counter weeks ago. "She's right. It is a private matter. And tonight, I think I'll settle the account."